All right. Well, welcome back to episode 2 of AI and You. Data without the data fuel. Ben, there's no AI fire, is there? Ben Blancare, everyone. Welcome to the show.
Hey, good morning, Jeff. How are you today?
Oh,
I'm
it's
really
another.
looking forward to today's show.
If this is going to be you've come up with, and I got to give you credit for this, a really interesting panel today, a really interesting format for how we're going to have this conversation. But really, Ben, it's about, well, it all gets back to data with AI, doesn't it?
Absolutely, that is sort of the foundation. AI is the tip of it, but you've got to have the depth to make sure it's responsible.
That's right. Now, this program that we put on now twice. This is our second one, once a month. That's right. Hey, Megan, thank you for doing that. Everyone, I want to encourage you before we get started to introduce yourselves, because this isn't a conversation where you are just listening. You get to participate in this conversation. But the only way you can do that is if you introduce yourselves. So tell us who you are, tell us where you are, because we'd love to know where in the world you are watching us from. Now, we've got this stream paired all over the place, probably 6 different locations. So we will see a consolidation, hopefully, if all the tech works, over here on our screen. You may not see everyone's comments, but we'll see them. If you have any questions for the panel as we get going into this, I'd encourage you to ask them. All right, now, this is a conversation where Ben and I are going to help guide you through the conversation, the topic of understanding and appreciating the fact that everybody loves them some AI these days, but without data and without good data, really your AI events are really going to lack. Now, somebody's been working in data for a good long, well, everybody has who's going to be on this program, but let's start by bringing up Brian Samsel. Now, Brian is with one of our sponsoring organizations and partner organizations here, the International Institute for Analytics. So, Brian, we're looking forward to you popping up on the screen here momentarily. There you are. Welcome to the program, Brian.
Good morning. Hey, thanks for having me back. Good to see
Hey,
you guys.
you are no stranger to the live streams here, so
Oh,
thanks for being here. Why don't you tell the good folks a little bit about yourself?
yeah. Hey, buddy. Brian Samsel. I am currently the Vice President of Analytics Strategy here at IAA. I've spent my career in data and analytics, kind of starting from the statistics side of things. And, we get to come alongside and partner with data and analytics leaders in a whole wide variety of organizations right now. So, hey,
That's
thanks again for having me.
Absolutely. Really looking forward to the conversation. Now, next up in the panel is somebody, again, returning from our first conversation, and that's Reagan Avon. So, Reagan, come on up on stage here. As if you have any control of that, Daniel or Megan will make that happen, but you are the co-founder and CEO of Align AI. And I'm sure just in mere seconds, you're going to show up here. Oh, Reagan is not actually, I'll tell you what, Reagan is at a client's site. She got there early so she could have this conversation, and she's having technical problems. So while Reagan figures that out, we have a guest of honor, a new face to the show, but not a new face to data and AI, and that is Kathy Coons, who's a principal with data strategy and healthcare over at AWS. Kathy, welcome to the program.
Yeah, great to be here. Really excited about the discussion. Kind of like Brian, spent a lot of time, my whole career in data and analytics. I started out from the data side and then I did what I call worked my way up the data food chain and ended up leading analytic transformations at multiple large organizations. So love all things data and how they create value for businesses. So thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Now, we were having a lot of fun poking fun at Reagan earlier because she is our token millennial in the conversation, and now she's really not even here to defend herself, the poor girl. But so that means that we have all been in IT and working in our careers for a good long time. But Kathy, what was your first role in IT?
My first role in IT was writing ETL code to
Mm.
populate a customer data mart that would be used for targeting customers at Office Depot. And so I was writing SQL code that was going to be run through JCL and populate a Teradata data warehouse. So that's where I
Wow.
started.
Now, how does it feel to have had that as your first career in IT, which is super fascinating, to now working over at AWS, where on stage last week we kept hearing no ETL, no ETL, no, none of that. It's all gone.
Mind blown. I mean, just so many things. When I came to AWS, I was still kind of in that mindset of, to run your business on data, you need a big box with all the data in the middle. It just it just was a different color box, orange for Teradata, red for Oracle, blue if it was IBM, right? And now with all of the different services that are available, all the different ways to store, access, move data, not move data, as you said, Jeff, it's just a really amazing time and a little bit overwhelming to be in the data space.
Overwhelming. And, as I think about my career, which in tech goes back for a good while, a couple of decades at least, the data folks, I hate to tell you this, they weren't the cool kids. They were in a corner. They were creating reports for, they were bringing data from different data sources together. When they started to create, data marts and the like, at least they started to get a little attention, but always begging for resources, always begging for attention, not begging for attention, but, there's sort of the reports that eventually would make their way up into the C-suite. You're front and center now. How's it feel to be front and center?
That spotlight can burn hot, right? And so but I think just with the options that you have today, it is incredible, and the opportunity to really transform how businesses operate with data is an amazing opportunity. And I've had discussions with colleagues and customers just about where our industry is right now, because of today's topic, and what an opportunity we have to be established in this field, but at the front end of a new way to create value that can be really transformative.
Yeah. Now, speaking of the spotlight burning hot, the other thing that burns hot around here are iPhones when you're trying to run a stream. Isn't that right, Reagan? Welcome back to the program. How was that for a segue?
Thanks, and clearly I can't get unmuted either. So sorry, everyone, technical challenges. But thanks for having me. I'm Reagan, co-founder and CEO of Align AI and founder of Women in Analytics. And if I cut out, I'm sorry. I'll be back.
All right, well, we'll take as much as your iPhone will allow. And as we've been watching everybody introducing themselves, thank you so much for that. There are folks from all over the world. I saw Bangalore, I saw Kashmir, I saw, well, more than one person from the Columbus area. You guys have a lot of friends. Paris is here, Houston is here, Arkansas is here. Westerville, Ohio, Columbus, Florida, Orlando is here. So really a global audience for our conversation today. So Ben, why don't you introduce the topic? What are we talking about here today?
Yeah, first I need to be unmuted. Oh, I am unmuted. All right. So folks, first of all, this is an ongoing series that is a collaboration between CDO Magazine, Women in Analytics, IIA, and guest speakers to help educate our enterprises and all our customers around, all things AI. And so what we're going to do is every couple of weeks, we're going to have one of these shows and we're going to write some work product. And so I would hope that you all join us because this is the first industry collaboration across these groups, and it's wicked cool. So today, last week we talked about readiness. Today we're going to talk about the foundation of AI, which is data. And so before, it's kind of like a race car. You can have a really cool engine, but you got no fuel. You're gonna sit there. And so we're going to talk about what that fuel is and how do you make sure that fuel gets in the engine, and how do you make sure it combusts, and all those kind of things. So I'm pretty excited about it. And so we got a new format, right, Jeff? We're going to try something new.
We're going to try something new. We're going to ask you to step out on a limb and play a role that maybe you're not comfortable with or that you're not used to doing every single day. And that is, we're going to ask you to pretend you don't know anything. You are the new CDO. We're doing a little role play in action here. You are the new VP of data. You're the CDO. And well, maybe you just sort of inherited that job. Maybe you know some things. Maybe you don't know some things. What we're going to do is go around this panel here today and help educate Ben about what he needs to know. Now, from a data point of view, these are all the things that you need to know as well. So if you've got questions that, as a new CDO, as somebody new in this space, pop them in the chat down there. We'll try to get to as many of them as we can. If we can't get to all of them, we'll find a way to comment or write a post that answers them as well. So keep them coming. So So you are the newbie, Ben. At Reagan, Kathy, Brian, it is up to you to make him the smartest person that we know. Now let's start here. What does it mean to have data and data systems? Because we put in this title that it's fancy, it's clickbaity. Without data, there's no AI fire. But what does that ultimately mean, Ben? Or not Ben, Brian. Let's start over with you. Data or data systems? What does it mean? What does all this data stuff mean?
Yeah, yeah. Well, thinking of talking to people new in the role, I mean, I would say congratulations. It's an exciting role. I think this is one of the things I've always loved about this field is you've got to be good at the technology. You've got to be good at understanding the business. You've got to be good at, dealing with change management. So there's a lot to it. So congratulations, you've got your hands full. And looking forward to helping you. I think the one thing I would convey initially is we see most organizations, or I should say all organizations, have something we refer to as an information economy, right? And it's important to understand that. So, if you think of back to, your econ classes back in university, right? You have a supply side, right? Which is your data and analytics team, right? And you have a demand side, which is the rest of the business. And both those sides are present in all these organizations. And, I think your first task as a CDO is to figure that out, right? Because that demand side, they're going to get their data one way or the other. And it's important for you to understand kind of the culturally, how do they get it today? What do they do with it? And how can you improve that and make that better for them? That's where I'd start.
That's where you'd start. So, Kathy, I would imagine as you're walking around into organization after organization, talking about the great tools from AWS, what advice do you have for Ben as he thinks about his data, especially the core elements of it and the systems that operate it?
Yeah, even though I am with AWS and we've got a lot of great, amazing tech, when I'm working with a new CDO, my first advice is, in our best practice experience, a data strategy is merely an expanded articulation of a business strategy that describes how the use of data analytics, AI, and ML is going to accelerate the realization of those outcomes that business strategy is designed to achieve, right? So understand where that how that business strategy has been articulated and spend time with your peers understanding their role in executing that business strategy and where you have opportunities to use data analytics, AI, and ML to give those peer leaders greater confidence in their ability to execute on that strategy. And then go back and figure out the data and the technical services and requirements that are needed to accomplish that.
Yeah. Now, Ben, as the newbies, how does that ring with you?
I love that idea because I love sort of the notion like let's start at the answer or what we're trying to do from an outcome sort of perspective. And I know sometimes I'm a geek, so I've got to I start working on the geek stuff first versus like what am I trying to make? And so I think it's really good. Like the first thing I should probably do is sit down with my peers, the chief strategy officer, chief sales officer, say, okay, let's chat a little bit about kind of what outcomes might we try to create, and then engage in a conversation when I'm seated at the table instead of just an order taker, and say, hey, here's some things you can do. You may not have known you could do these kind of things. So that's what I heard is really important, and I love sort of the notion, but the Brian to that said, but I should probably start with like figure out what my data assets are. Like, do I actually have a good inventory of every spreadsheet, every source of truth, every kind of thing that people go to? Because but we got thousands of phantom spreadsheets in our organization that people rely on. So I think probably one of my first things is like figure out where all the stuff is.
Yeah. Now, Reagan is, you're co-founder over at Align AI, meaning from a consulting standpoint. How is this advice ringing with you? What were Ben's thoughts? What does Ben need to know that he doesn't know at this point, and how would you guide him? And we do not hear you at the moment. All right, you just muted yourself. If you leave yourself unmuted, our producers will handle that part.
How about now?
Wonderful.
Okay, great. Yeah, sorry about that, everyone. So I would say my first conversation.
First conversation would be, let's talk bandwidth. All right, we unfortunately lost Reagan. I guess that phone heated up a little bit again, but that's all right. She'll be back, but I really do hope she can be back because she is a brilliant person, and I'm anxious to hear what she has to say. All right, so I also want to give another quick shout out because there are so many more places around the world that are introducing themselves, whether it's Venice, Florida, Saudi Arabia, upstate New York. I saw Vancouver, Windsor, Canada. Really a global audience here today. Thanks for being here, everyone. There was a really interesting question that Keith popped up before, and it takes us down into the deep end, like right away into the deep end. And I'm wondering which one of you is curious about answering the question on this one. Maybe Kathy, you can grab this one. What's the value of private A functionality without semantic ontology? Maybe you want to define semantic ontology for the newbie Ben. It's for Ben. It's for Ben. It's not for me. It's for Ben.
Well, I'm going to pass that over to Brian because that's really coming at it more from the statistical side than the transformational side. So,
Hot potato. Who wants it?
I wanted to pass it to Kathy. I don't know.
yeah, I know. That is a tough question.
Yeah,
It is. Maybe one of those we'll write a blog post about after the fact.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you think about, kind of systematizing ideas, right? That semantic ontology of we have to define all of our terms and how they're related is critical. But I think the thing to think about in that case is rather than thinking you have to use a lot of human resources to create that semantic ontology, right? Leverage technology to help you create that, right? And with generative AI, I mean, that's a great use case of generative AI is to look across your documents, reporting repositories, that sort of thing, to help create that semantic ontology that can then help ensure optimize the AI toward your organization's ethos and brand voice is what I would say.
Yeah, I think it's a great answer. It's a great answer.
Yeah, and
All right.
I'd add, it's, I feel like you're seeing more and more tools come out, right, that allow you to very easily use your organization's, right, use your organization's ontology, right, with some of these large language models, right. Like I think it was, a couple of weeks ago, right, OpenAI, right, with ChatGPT, right, you could very, very simply create your own GPTs, right? You could upload kind of that, some of your organization's own documents, right, and start to take advantage of that. So I think the tools are they're evolving very, very rapidly there, and it's exciting to see. It's hard to keep up too.
Right, and I think really what you guys have both called out is the fact that while having that type of a definition is valuable, is especially in this area as well as all areas, use the tools that are available. Maybe even some fine tools from AWS, right, Kathy?
Yes. Neptune, Graph, use that.
Exactly. All right, so we've started this first part of the question with Ben and helping educate him as the new CDO in his new organization. And but now we need to get into how does he start figuring this stuff out? How does he this is where biz alignment really starts to matter. So Kathy, how do you really start to unpack that on that? We'll call it day one was figure out, to Ben's point, what's all here. Day two is alignment in the business. How does he start to do that?
Well, I think it's really I see a lot of CDOs kind of take this interviewing approach, right? And I'm going to go or send one of my team members to go interview the leaders and figure out what they need and what they want. And while that can be a great starting point, at some point there needs to be a session to align the priorities across the different functions.
Yeah.
And understand where there can be some opportunities for synergy in the deployment of use cases. Let's say between manufacturing and supply chain, right? Or commercial operations in life sciences with research and development, right? So as you think about that endpoint, right, that we were talking about, Jeff, that outcome you want to create, Amazon is known for our working backwards methodology. As you work backwards to understand how do you decompose those into use cases, data products, let's say, and then as you work backwards even further from those data products to what data is required to create those products, what sort of analytic tools are required to create those, dashboards, what if scenarios, recommendations, next best actions, and then leveraging that cataloging activity you've already done, right? Where do you have an opportunity for some quick wins? And especially in those organizations where the leaders may be a little bit nascent in their willingness to adopt analytics, show them the value, but do it in a way where every investment in that value creation is also building out those foundational components that can be reused for future use cases, so that every subsequent use case, you're having to source, cleanse, harmonize less and less data. You're having to bring in fewer analytic tools, and you design it to quickly solve a use case while concurrently building out a modern data architecture. And that would be my advice, is bring them together, bring that leadership team together with your recommendation of use cases and a sequencing of how you would at least order them from both a time to value as well as a benefit for the business. Get discussion. Let them understand the trade-offs. Why are you doubling down on supply chain and seemingly ignoring marketing, right? To get that alignment around how we benefit the broader organization, and then go in and make sure you execute that first one well, and execute it for somebody who is going to be an advocate. Be your evangelist of, this is what AI and data created for my function. My peers, you guys better start stepping up and getting this benefit, or I'm going to be the shining star and likely the next CEO.
So,
So
oh, go ahead, Ben.
yeah. So just sort of a follow-up question. So because I'm trying to envision the meetings I'm going to have, right? I'm the newbie CDO. So what I heard you say is, after I do my Gemba walk and I interview folks and we talk about it and I do my research with all the McKinseys, all the folks that say, here's the trends, I should probably bring them together and do a readout that says, here's what all of us are talking about, right? Here's the threads. And then perhaps start doing a little analysis for them that says, I did a little analysis on all the ideas. Here's the ideas on a 2x2 grid, right? Here's the things that are hard, and here's the easy. And then focus folks on, and here's where we can combine things on the easy and see who steps up and says, I'll run with it, right? Because without a champion, I'm kind of screwed.
Yep.
Right. Yep. And then once we figure out what those couple of use cases are, create some expectations. Said, look, we'll get to those other really cool things, but let's do the simple thing first. And then perhaps when I think about the execution plan of this thing, start thinking about it from a different lens of which of these creates reusable asset. Like start looking at the asset library associated with those use cases and say, which has the most common asset base, so that if I build this building block, I can reuse it, right? That's typically something I hadn't really thought about. It's like when the lens is like, am I creating stuff that's reusable?
Yeah, yes. I think that's been a very valuable thing we've seen just the last couple of years in the data analytics field, is we're taking more of that product management approach, right? That's been existing in software development and tech companies for years, and we're applying it to data products, right? Or these reusable data assets. And I don't know. I think that's something I've been very excited about for a little while here, and we're seeing people get a lot of mileage out of that, right? And get a lot of reuse by taking that kind of approach and mentality.
Yeah. Now, as Ben, makes the rounds and starts to form his team, we see this in enterprises a lot, and that is, do you go with a centralized approach to fill in the blanks, marketing, data, any of the things, or do you go with a distributed approach? So that very much applies inside of the data world. You'll see sometimes CDO team groups will pull together as a centralized team. Sometimes it's a distributed team. Let's talk strategy a little bit, maybe pros and cons. Kathy, we'll start with you. And by the way, Kathy, you have a fan in the audience. Donella from Nigeria is there and is
Oh,
appreciating your feedback and hopes to do her internship at AWS someday.
awesome. Yeah, it'd be great to
We
have
need
you.
more women in IT.
Yeah, yeah, awesome. Oh, great to see you, Donella. Yeah, so being a good consultant, I have to say it depends. Uh,
Well done.
yeah, what we see is that organizations, as I said, who may have a nascent ability in the business to kind of step up and control their own fate from a data analytics creation and consumption perspective, it makes sense to start centralized, right? So you can have a corpus of skilled team members who then partner with the business, maybe have a data product manager per business line that says, I'm the one who ensures that our manufacturing line is building data products that help accelerate your business outcomes. But as the business starts gaining more skill, as the number of data product consumers starts expanding, which you hope that happens quickly and eventually exponentially, then you need to think about moving out to that decentralized model where the business has more ability to access, manage, and own data assets with an expectation that those data assets meet the requirements of a data product, that they are findable, they're accessible, they can be understood, and they can be shared broadly across an organization, of course, in alignment with your security, compliance, governance, and regulatory requirements. But starting centralized is great to get those quick wins and show the organization what good looks like. But if you double down on centralized as the organization grows, you're going to become a choke point and will be a victim of your own success. So understanding what are the signposts that say we are at a point to decentralize, and what that looks like as you move toward decentralization is critical as you start this journey.
Yeah, wise words. Brian, what would you add to that? Centralized,
Yeah,
decentralized.
I think what Kathy said is great. We typically see as organizations increase their maturity, right? There's an early stage. There's centralization makes a ton of sense, and then as more maturity comes, you kind of move towards that hybrid approach, right? Where you have some centralized roles, but then you have teams out there in the business unit. And I would just say it adds a number of benefits, right? Obviously, you can be more responsive to the business unit, but also it helps when it comes budgeting time, right? Because you now have you now have your business unit executives saying, well, this team that's embedded with me is great. Like, I fully support them. I want them, right? I'm willing to, put in some of my budget there. So, right, it helps as you try to maintain that team over time too.
Hey, Brian and Kathy, I've got a follow-up question. I've got to hire some folks, right? Can you help me think about what are sort of like the key sort of like domain expertise? Do I need a data governance person? Do I need a data engineering person? I'm just trying to figure out what should be the key roles I should be staffing first with our office here.
You want to go, Brian?
Well,
You want me to?
Yeah, I don't know. It's hard, right? It's hard to know. I think, if I think of skills there, the most important thing is having somebody who can negotiate that gap between the business and the data and analytics team, right? So I want somebody who can be almost, again, whether you're an actual consultant, right, or whether you're in a large organization, you have to have that consulting mentality, right? So that's probably the first thing I'm looking at, right? Somebody who's curious and can solve problems and can bring that back to skills like, your data scientists and engineers to partner with them to build something.
Kathy,
Yeah,
what
I,
would you add to that?
I would add that consultant, and you should make sure that consultant, if you can find somebody in the organization who has been there a while, since you're new to the organization, you need to understand the culture, the decisional power structure, right? The how what is the subtext of how projects move forward, and if that can be somebody who is really excited about data and analytics, maybe has done some skunks works projects that have been successful, but understands how to navigate the organization, that's critical as well, right? And what we're really touching on, Brian and I, is that connection to business value, right? If you start, I mean, the data value chain that AWS uses is, collect, store, discover, analyze, consume, and act. I have a lot of new CDOs who come to me and say, I need to collect all the data. Well, if you think about, using third-party data and external data, all the data is a lot of data. And if you think you have to collect it all before you can create value, you're going to be collecting it for a while, and you will be on the path that we call the CDO of Chief Disappearing Officer, right? So so you have to focus on that business value and double down on that.
Well, and Kathy, I think you've probably heard this too, but not just collect it all, but like we've got to clean it all too, right? Whatever, and again, if you try to do both those things, I mean, you're never done, right?
Right. And you're never going to move across. So you think about taking those, you have that priority use case we were talking about earlier. You, rather than we're going to do everything in the collect volume column, and then we're going to do everything in the store column, it's taking these horizontal stripes where you are using best practices and creating those reusable assets within each of those columns, but not filling each of those columns one at a time.
I love sort of that notion that, so you just made my life a lot easier, because I was getting overwhelmed with like, I got to inventory everything. Oh my God, I can't even do that in my garage. How am I going to do that in enterprise, right? So I think like the notion of like, what am I trying to build? And like taking a thin slice and start out with that seems like a good approach. Because if I can't do it with a little thing, how am I going to do it with a big thing, right? And maybe part of what I need to do is think about, how do I get the organization used to this cadence of like, what's my use case? What's the data? Got to collect it, got to clean it, and go all the way through a process versus doing batch things, right?
Yes.
So my batch size is 1 through the process.
Exactly.
So I love that notion.
Well, the other thing that does, especially with you being new, you're going to have some incumbent team members, right? It gives you the opportunity to observe them in action, right? And understand where you may have gaps in skills, right? In technology. The other thing about, skill gaps is in your data product consumers. Do they know how to use these? Do they know how to interpret this dashboard? Do they know how to interact with it properly, right? So it really infuses this test and learn mentality while you're also creating value.
Yeah. All right. So our 30-minute program is now going to be 3 hours, because there's some great questions coming in, and none of them are fast questions, fast answers. But I do want to try to hit a couple of these things. So a lot of it, Brian, focuses around what you talk about a lot on all the programs that I've been on with you, and that is treat data as a product. Now, we treat data as a product. That means there are certain characteristics and things to consider, like its quality, its governance, its pipelines, its bias, fairness, continuous monitoring, but also security. There's a question in here, is who ultimately then is responsible for the security of the data? CISO or the CDO? Brian, let's go to you and then over to Kathy.
Yeah. The two have to work together. Obviously, I think if there's elements of access, and that's probably more in the CISO's realm, right? But I think there's the CDO and the data and analytics team, right? They bring the elements of anonymization, right? Like I'm really intrigued by some of these technologies that have been around, like differential privacy, right? Where we can mask the data, but still maintain its statistical usability, right? Like, there's some great things there, right? So I think you've got to have that combination there.
Yeah.
But, for most of the security stuff, I really think about it's probably in the CISO's realm. And then when I think about, how do we kind of protect the sensitive information within that data set, and only kind of, reveal what we need to reveal, that's more in the CDO's realm.
All right, so much like it, the new cloud world is our isolated fiefdoms are now all gone. We all have to work together as partners in crime to help advance what Kathy keeps going back to, and that is the business mission, the business value. Kathy, quick question for you, and that I love Keith Instone asked this question. He says, "Dirty data is bad, completely clean is too hard. What's the ideal middle ground?" What advice would you have for Keith and Ben?
Again, it depends. But if you think about just your best practice, right, of raw, refined, harmonized data assets as a core principle, data quality is like water quality. The quality I need to irrigate my garden or a lettuce field in California is very different than the data quality I need for open heart surgery. And so understanding the decision risk that the data quality represents, understanding the level of fidelity that is needed. I mean, data is just digital residue that a business process executed. How much fidelity do you need to that original business process to be able to trust that that this is an accurate representation of that process and you can use this data for subsequent activities? And it really comes down to the risk that bad data creates and what are the downsides if that risk is realized and you make a wrong decision from that data.
Okay, so many great points made in there. First of all, it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. I think the irrigation of a field or irrigation of a wound are great examples of
Great, yeah.
varying degree of cleanliness that's needed. There's so much good stuff in that answer. Ben, how's this making you feel as the new CDO?
It feels like I've got to figure out how to get on Brian's and Kathy's calendar a lot, but I am feeling like this notion that let's start out with the basics. This isn't a technical thing to start with. This is a business thing to start out with. It sounds as if like I've got to play part salesperson, part educator, and part convener, because ultimately I don't own the data. I just create some structure and I help govern it and I help create pipelines, but the business owns it, because as Kathy said, the data is just exhaust from business processes. So if I'm going to shift left, I've got to start out with the business processes and the owner. So it's their data. And so I love this sort of that notion because I don't feel so alone now. So that's good. I like the notion that I've heard of sort of like thin slice this thing, don't get overwhelmed, right? Let's not try to boil the ocean at the beginning. But I do love this notion, like, it's because I don't know, my CEO's like freaking out. We got to do AI. We got to do this. Our competitors do this. Like, okay, but realize like, that line item for data investment I've been asking for the last couple of years, and they sort of kick the can down. You can't kick the can down anymore because with AI, right? It's if you don't have good data, it can't create good. It doesn't recognize the patterns. You can't predict. So you know what? I think I love this job now because data geeks are coming into their own now, and I kind of love that, right?
Yeah, we really take on that
It's a
role of
renaissance.
Yeah, as the CDO, I mean, I think you've shed a great light on it here, and the whole team is where you're not this hoarder of these assets called the data. You are the caretaker, you are the steward, you are the shepherd of helping these different business units get the most out of the Kathy's term digital residue of the business. That's I'm going to use that like for the rest of my life. Digital residue, by the way, rest of my life. So that's fantastic. Now, we've talked about organizational structure. We've talked about finding team members, but we haven't really talked about resources that Ben and other CDOs can utilize. And what I love for the producers to do is bring up some QR codes real quick, because there are partner organizations out there in the world who can actually help a lot. So first of all, there's Rackspace. We're here to help. We've got resources to help clean up data, help organize data, help create solutions utilizing great tools from AWS and maybe some others. Women in Analytics. I would highly recommend that you check that organization out. A great sponsor here today. I really wish Reagan could have stuck around. You would have loved what she had to say. In International Institute for Analytics, as who Brian is here representing. They've got some amazing assets. And of course, as a great ongoing continuing learning location is CDO Magazine. So there are all of the QR codes. So go ahead and grab a screenshot of that so that you can go investigate all of these later on. Now, I'm going to go to one last question as we wrap up our 30-minute show on minute 41. And Martha brings up a great question, and I want to hammer home this last point. And she asked the question. She says, "Does that mean that the data owner is accountable for the quality of the data?" Now, I'm going to answer for everybody. Kathy, she's going to say it depends. Brian's going to say it's a team effort, and everybody is right. So, Kathy, I'll let you actually expound on words that I put in your mouth.
No, yes, I would say yes. It just depends on when they have the skills, the tools, and the ability to fully manifest that ownership. But that is the aspirational goal every organization should have. We have a model that we work with customers called a modern data community, where you have producers, and these are the owners, both business and technical owners of the systems that are creating, executing those business processes and creating that data, right? You'll have consumers who need that data to create business outcomes, whether it's a dashboard or a Gen AI model. But then in the middle, you need capabilities that make it easy for that data to flow from the producer to the consumer in a way that is secure, governed, and compliant.
Yeah.
And that's really where Ben's team, as that new CDO, needs to start working toward, is no longer managing the water that's flowing through there, right? But making sure they have the right filters, pipes, and pumps to bring that in the right way, understand its quality, quarantine it if it's not the right quality, allow the producers to understand what they're introducing into the environment, and make it easy for consumers to have access to that.
Oh, so rich, so good. Brian, what would you add to that?
Yeah, I would add, it kind of in between too. That's where I saw in the chat, there's tools about a question about data catalogs, right? That's where some of those tools that allow you to inventory the data, make that inventory available, show the lineage, right? How does the data, when it gets from A to B, what happens to it and where does it come from, right? That's where some of those tools are really valuable. I think my last piece of advice, for Ben, the new CDO too, would be don't forget about the offensive use of the data as well, right? We've talked a lot here about quality and availability and the data itself, and that's super important. But a lot of the research shows that if you only focus on kind of the defensive aspects of data, you might be looking for another CDO job in a couple of years, right? So don't forget the offensive use, right? Don't forget the analytics. Don't forget capturing the value of what you're doing and demonstrating that back to the business.
Fantastic. So Ben, I'm going to let you kind of sum up some thoughts here. What are you thinking? And then I'll close this out and we'll be done.
Well, what I'm thinking is I don't want to be the chief disappearing officer. So given that context, I've got to continue to focus on the business value. Like at the end, it's going to be, why are we doing this? I've got to make sure I've got a cadre of my business leaders working alongside me along this. I've got to take this one step at a time, a thin slice through the process. I love the analogy Kathy had around water, right? It just depends what our end goal is. In that, what this means though is I've got to make sure I have a good way to get my business partners invested in the process, right? This isn't like, hey, here's a catalog, you can use it, because it depends. And what I also heard was, in what we didn't talk about as much, but I've been doing a lot, there's a lot of freaking tools out there, right? There's a lot of tool sets around this, and my head spins when I look at the potential two-stack and everyone calling me. What I think I've got to do is I've got to figure out some smart people that can figure out how to do this work with the simplest set of tools so that we can be consistent in its application, right? And that it's not the amount of tools. Like, I think I should do the 80-20 rule, right? What's the 20% of tools that can do 80%, but I focus on making sure I have people that know how to use those tools. If I can do that, I think I can be really successful. We can't hear you, Jeff.
It really helps if you unmute. We really could have taken this 30 minutes and turned it into 3 hours. There is so much to talk about here, but hopefully everyone, this helps give you some views into how to approach as a team, as an organization, not in a siloed fashion, approaching this as towards the right business outcomes that really your business is trying to do. Remember, technology is here to drive business outcomes. Technology doesn't exist for technology's sake. Us as the geeks enjoy it, but it doesn't pay the bills. What pays the bills is whatever business you are in. So, Kathy, thank you so much for being a part of the program today. You have an open invitation to come back anytime you like.
Thank you.
Great insights. Brian, Ben, great to see you as always. Reagan, we hope to see you next time from a high bandwidth location, and look forward to what you have to share with us. Everyone, this is the last of these shows for 2023, but we are going to move next year into, as we come back in January, it's not going to be a month in between. Ben, right? We're going to start tightening these up. Maybe every couple of weeks, we'll be back with more incredible data insights. I cannot be more impressed with the comments we've had through this whole program and the questions that have been there. We have so much rich content. We could do hours on any one of those comments. All right,
Thank
Ben,
you all.
Any closing words for us as we head out?
No, please join us. Please continue to be part of this great community. We're working collaboratively to advance us all. So thank you all for joining.
All right, folks, we are going to go out with the slide that's got all the QR codes to all the information that you need. We're, of course, sponsored here by FAIR from Rackspace, which is the foundry for AI at Rackspace. And that is the organization that is here to help you not only transform your data, but drive meaningful AI and responsible AI outcomes for your organization. Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of 2023, and we'll see you in January 2024.